The time by Carrie Chris is 6 p.m. Time for CBX Business News. The Business News headlines is brought to you by QMax Wealth Management, making more possible.
Bureaucratic drag, election economics, and Europe holds the line on rates. Good evening and welcome to CBX Business News for Thursday, February 5, 2026. I'm Rochelle Moncrief. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, Jamaica's Prime Minister warns slow bureaucracy holding back economic growth, calls for faster systemic reform to unlock productivity. Also ahead, Barbados opposition promises to cut VAT to 15% as the election campaign intensifies. And later, ECB holds interest rates steady, with inflation on track to hit its 2% target in the medium term. Stay with us as we unpack these stories and more right after the break.
Wealth is not simply counted in dollars or cents, but in the time we spend with love, in love, giving love. Wealth is not simply a means to an end. It is the means to live out loud. Wealth is more than money. It's about family, the memories you create, the legacy you leave behind, and your ability to enjoy life in the moment. It's also about seeing the QMax possibilities and seizing investment opportunities to achieve the future you want and deserve. Which is why QMax Wealth will focus on your investments so you can experience more. Because true wealth is truly more. To start investing today, call 876-926-7767.
So much book you need for high school?
I'll show you how to make sure you have all the money for my books and even some extra. It's called budgeting, Dad. Making a budget is the most important thing you can do to track your money. It keeps a record of how much you make, how much you spend, where you spend it, and most importantly, how much you can save. Write down all your income, write down all your expenses, see where you can cut down and allot more money to more important things, like saving.
Serious about building Jamaica? Build with solid PVC pipes and conduits, manufactured in Jamaica by Phosphate, made to the highest standard. Solid PVC pipes and conduits are made in Jamaica by Jamaicans for Jamaicans. Available at hardware stores across the island. Take some solid advice, support our economy, and build well. Buy solid PVC pipes. Next time, ask for solid brand PVC pipes and conduits. Call our distributors or Phosphate at 876-937-5099.
The local news is brought to you by Derriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments.
Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with a blunt warning from Jamaica's government. Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness is calling for urgent reform of Jamaica's public bureaucracy, warning that slow, sequential decision-making is now actively holding back economic growth, investment execution, and productivity gains. Speaking at the official handing over of the Essex Valley Agro-Processing Facility on Wednesday, Holness says, while Jamaica's processes may be complex, they have become unnecessarily complicated.
The problem with our bureaucracy is that it is complicated, meaning that things don't happen in parallel, simultaneously. They happen sequentially. So you do one before you can move on to the other. They're not outcome sensitive. So it doesn't matter if there was a hurricane and people had to procure telecommunications and other critical things to make sure that we can get to people who are stranded. That is not a matter for the public bureaucracy.
He argues that strong fiscal discipline and stable public finances are no longer enough to drive growth.
The pace has to increase, because whatever benefit we were getting from the fiscal discipline, the dividends from good management of the finances of the country, people soon forget about that. No new taxes don't mean nothing to anybody again. They come to expect that.
He says the next phase of economic expansion must come from higher productivity, both inside the public sector and across private enterprises.
The biggest challenge we face right now is employers are coming to me to say, Prime Minister, you have to do something about the shortage of labor. It is a problem in the society. We have looked at the issue. We have done as best as we can to raise the minimum wage. We are the only government to have consistently raised the minimum wage, and we have made certain commitments towards doing that, towards increasing wage levels, because we understand.
That was Jamaica's Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness. Mayberry Jamaican Equities, MJE, is positioning its portfolio for a rebound in financial stocks, arguing that delayed monetary easing has been the main drag on market performance. Speaking during Mayberry's investor briefing recently, Executive Chairman Christopher Berry says the local stock market is now primed to recover as liquidity conditions improve and confidence begins to return to the financial sector.
The stock cycle is driven by growth and also by liquidity. So I noticed, for example, Philip was saying Melissa put a spike in the wheel of the BOJ expected rate cuts. So that's one of the things I think, from my perspective, BOJ called wrong. When we had a hurricane, they should have been easing more aggressively than they did. And it's now showing up. The dollar is revaluing and the NIR is up like 800 million. So there was no need. I think if they were easing more, it would have allowed businesses to get back on their feet faster. They missed that opportunity. But we have the rest of the year before us for them to adjust what they're doing. And that will play into the rebound. So
that was Executive Chairman of Mayberry Investments Limited, Christopher Berry. Beneath the headline swings in Cygnus Credit Investments 2025 results lies a quieter but potentially more consequential shift, one that could reshape how future dividends are funded. For the first time since its acquisition and restructuring, the company's Puerto Rico operation has entered a dividend-paying phase, transitioning from a growth and valuation asset into a direct cash generator for the group. Chief Investment Officer Jason Morris confirmed that a dividend policy has now been established at the Puerto Rico board level, with initial distributions already beginning.
A decision was made at the Puerto Rico board where the dividend policy for the Puerto Rico business was established and agreed on and signed off on, and the dividends flowing from SCI Puerto Rico would expect to start flowing in financial year 2026. And financial year 2026 started on July 1, 2025.
That was Chief Investment Officer at Cygnus Credit Investments, Jason Morris. R.A. Williams Distributors delivered strong top-line growth in the second quarter, even as higher investment costs pushed the company into a short-term loss. The junior market-listed pharmaceutical distributor reported a 32% revenue growth, with sales climbing to 485 million Jamaican dollars for the 3 months ended October 31, driven by sustained demand and an expanded product portfolio. Gross profit rose to $181 million, pointing to improved pricing discipline and a favorable product mix. But that growth came alongside heavier spending as the company accelerated investment in infrastructure, brand visibility, and sales support. Operating expenses increased 14% year-on-year, pushing the company into an operating loss of $7.4 million compared with a profit in the prior year. After finance costs, R.A. Williams recorded a pre-tax loss of 26.8 million Jamaican dollars for the quarter. Management says the setback reflects a deliberate investment phase, not weakening demand. On the balance sheet, total assets expanded to 1.75 billion Jamaican dollars, while shareholders' equity remained solid at $741 million, underscoring balance sheet resilience during the expansion cycle. In other news, Jamaica and Sierra Leone are deepening Africa-Caribbean tourism ties, positioning resilience and youth leadership as new drivers of long-term growth. The commitment was reaffirmed during talks in Kingston between Jamaica's Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett and Sierra Leone's Tourism Minister Nabila Tunis, as both countries move to strengthen tourism cooperation beyond traditional travel promotion. At the center of the strategy is Global Tourism Resilience Day 2026, observed annually on February 17. Sierra Leone will host a youth-focused seminar at the University of Sierra Leone, placing young people at the forefront of resilience, identity, and development discussions, a move officials say strengthens the future workforce and policy pipeline for the tourism industry. Minister Bartlett confirmed that the first international observance outside Jamaica will be held in Nairobi, Kenya, while Sierra Leone's participation signals a broader Africa-Caribbean alignment around tourism and economic infrastructure. A major business development also emerged. Jamaica plans to establish the first West African satellite of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center in Freetown by late 2026, expanding research, crisis preparedness, and investment confidence across the region. We move to the latest updates from the JSE Equities. In Thursday's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 110 stocks, of which 40 advanced, 54 declined, and 16 traded firm. Leading today's winners are Medical Disposables and Supplies, Palace Amusement Company, Mayberry Jamaican Equities, and Dolphin Cove, while leading the losers are ISP Finance Services, Sagicor Real Estate X Fund, 138 Student Living Jamaica Variable Preference, and Lumber Depot. The main index declined by 4,058.20 points to close at 338,256.11 points. The junior market index declined by 27.51 points to close at 3,331.03 points.
And it's time for Market Education Feature, brought to you by CariCris, Regional Ratings, Global Standard.
In today's Market Education Feature, we're focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The SDGs are a global framework adopted by the United Nations to promote peace, prosperity, and environmental protection by the year 2030. There are 17 interconnected goals, all designed to balance economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. A major area of focus is Goal 13, which centers on climate action and climate financing. So far, 193 countries have committed to the SDGs. In Jamaica, progress on Goal 13 includes updated climate policy frameworks, reforestation initiatives, and stronger environmental protection measures aimed at building resilience to climate change.
The market education feature was brought to you by Caricris, Regional Ratings, Global Standards.
And that's it for the local news segment. Please stay with us. The regional news is up next.
The local news is brought to you by Darriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses. And Pulse Investments.
Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. What you put in is what you get out. What you put in is what you get out. Yeah. Build up your body, boost up your brain. Take on the world now. Say bye-bye pain. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Be good to you. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Distributed by Amalgamated Distributors Limited.
Welcome back. And now for the regional business news. In the Bahamas, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, is projecting real GDP growth of 2.8% in 2025, supported mainly by construction activity and cruise tourism. The fund says the economy expanded by 3.4% in 2024, with momentum holding through the first half of last year. Inflation has eased sharply, falling to 1.3% by mid-2025, helped by lower global energy prices, while unemployment stood at 9.3% in the second quarter. On the fiscal side, the IMF notes continued improvement. The government posted a primary surplus, with the overall deficit narrowing to 0.5% of GDP in the last fiscal year. However, public debt remains elevated at around 74% of GDP, well above the authority's medium-term target of 50%. Looking ahead, the IMF expects growth to gradually slow towards 1.5%, the economy's estimated potential rate, and is urging further fiscal reforms to lock in sustainability. With less than a week remaining before Barbadians head to the polls, the Democratic Labour Party DLP has sharpened its economic appeal, placing a proposed cut in value-added tax VAT to 15% at the center of its campaign message. At a DLP meeting in St. Peter on Tuesday, DLP President and Opposition Leader Ralph Thorne argued that the current 17.5% rate has become an excessive burden on households and said a return to 15% would deliver immediate cost of living relief without undermining economic stability.
And this Democratic Labour Party will go further. And this Democratic Labour Party is committed to the fiscal policy that VAT must be reduced from 17.5% to 15%. We are committed to that. We recognize, though, and the economists will tell you, that when you give people greater spending power, and it will give people greater spending power, that the risk is always that people will overspend, and it will put pressure on the foreign reserves, because a lot of what we consume is bought from overseas. And you buy from overseas and it is bought in foreign currency, so that there's always a balance you must achieve. You offer tax relief, but you are careful as to how that spending is done. But we in the Democratic Labour Party say to you that at this juncture of our history, when there's so much hardship in Barbados, it is more important to give people greater spending power while monitoring the foreign exchange complement.
That was DLP President and Opposition Leader of Barbados, Ralph Thorne. The government of St. Lucia has moved to distance itself from the recent launch of ride-hailing service Uber as public debate intensifies over the platform's sudden entry into the local transport market. Speaking at a pre-cabinet press briefing recently, Tourism and Commerce Minister Dr. Ernest Hilaire firmly rejected claims that the administration approved or facilitated the rollout, insisting the government played no role in authorizing or promoting Uber's operation on the island.
Contrary to what you've been hearing, reading from various sources, that the government of St. Lucia has not in any way approved, sanctioned, or encouraged Uber to operate any service in St. Lucia.
That was St. Lucia's Tourism and Commerce Minister, Dr. Ernest Hilaire. The denial comes just days after Uber began operating in St. Lucia, triggering mixed reactions nationwide. While some commuters have welcomed the added transportation option and potential price competition, others, particularly traditional taxi operators, have raised concerns about regulation, fairness, and the impact on livelihoods within the established transport sector. In other news, lease and interest cost widened losses at Cinema One Group in 2025, even as admissions and revenue continued to grow. Chairman Brian Jara says admissions and gross revenue across the group's cinemas in Port of Spain, San Fernando, and Chaguanas rose 3%, lifting gross revenue to $20.5 million and gross profit to $12.7 million. But those gains were more than offset by rising structural costs. Lease depreciation under IFRS 16 jumped 27% to $1.5 million, driving a 4% increase in overall expenses and leaving the group with an operating loss of $1.6 million. Pressure intensified below the operating line. Finance costs surged 28% to $6.7 million, largely reflecting interest on newly leased properties. Combined with a deferred tax loss, net losses widened to $9.2 million, up from $7.4 million the previous year. It's now time for news from the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 22 securities, of which 6 advanced, 6 declined, and 10 traded firm. Today's winners are Trinidad and Tobago NGL, A.S. Bryden & Sons Holdings, First Citizens Group Financial Holdings, and CIBC Caribbean Bank. While leading the losers are National Flour Mills, Unilever Caribbean, Guardian Holdings, and the West Indian Tobacco Company. Trading activity resulted in the following movements. The All-TNT Index advanced by 3.29 points to close at 1,391.66. The Composite Index advanced by 2.36 points to close at 959.86. The Cross-Listed Index advanced by 0.19 points to close at 69.63. The SME Index remained at 92.68. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment is up next.
It's feeling so good right now. Feeling so good right now, yeah, yeah. It's feeling so
Welcome back. In international news, the European Central Bank, ECB, has kept interest rates unchanged, signaling confidence that inflation is on track to return to its 2% target, even as global risks intensify. Speaking after the Governing Council meeting earlier today, ECB President Christine Lagarde says inflation is expected to stabilize at target, supported by easing price pressures and a resilient euro area economy.
The Governing Council today decided to keep the three key ECB interest rates unchanged. Our updated assessment reconfirms that inflation should stabilize at our 2% target in the medium term.
She also reported that euro area inflation slowed to almost 2% in January.
Inflation declined to 1.7% in January, from 2% in December and 2.1% in November. Energy inflation dropped to minus 4.1% after minus 1.9% in December and 0.5% in November.
That was ECB President Christine Lagarde. Meanwhile, beyond monetary policy, governments are reasserting control over critical infrastructure. Panama has drawn a firm line on control of its strategic assets as President Jose Raul Mulino declared that port concessions along the Panama Canal will never again be granted to a single company. The statement follows last week's ruling by Panama's Supreme Court nullifying the nearly 3-decade-old contract held by Hong Kong-based C.K. Hutchinson Holdings, which operated 2 key ports through its Panama Ports Company subsidiary. The court found the concession unconstitutional, citing exclusive privileges and tax exemptions that violated Panama's legal framework and undermined state control over critical infrastructure. Mulino said the ruling is definitive and dismissed international pressure, stressing that Panama will not allow itself to be threatened by any country on earth, even after China warned there would be heavy prices to pay for the decision. Finally, on the corporate front in the United States, Yum Brands says Pizza Hut will close 250 underperforming U.S. restaurants in the first half of this year as the parent company considers strategic options, including a potential sale of the brand. The closures come as Pizza Hut struggles to revive its U.S. business. Same-store sales in the U.S. fell 5% last year, pressured by aging dine-in locations and intensifying competition, particularly from delivery-focused rivals like Domino's, which posted 2.7% U.S. same-store sales growth through the first 9 months of last year. Yum, based in Louisville, Kentucky, confirmed it is targeting weaker performers across Pizza Hut's more than 6,000 U.S. locations following a formal review announced in November. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. The news recap is coming up on the other side of the break.
So much book you need for high school?
I'll show you how to make sure you have all the money for my books and even some extra. It's called budgeting, Dad. Making a budget is the most important thing you can do to track your money. It keeps a record of how much you make, how much you spend, where you spend it, and most importantly, how much you can save. Write down all your income, write down all your expenses, see where you can cut down and allot more money to more important things, like saving.
And now to recap our top stories. In the local news, Prime Minister Holness says slow bureaucracy now holding back growth. Regionally, DLP pledges VAT cut to 15% as election campaign intensifies. And internationally, ECB holds rates, sees inflation hitting 2% target medium term. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Rachelle Moncrief. Thanks for watching CBX, your vision, your business, your source.
Hello everyone, this is Richard Pandui, CEO for the Separate Group, the Bryans Group, and Chairman for CPJ. You're watching with me CBX, your region, your business, your source. Glad to have you with us.